Hi, welcome back. This is Dr. Herbold speaking to you again today about neck pain. So we started our conversation on our last video about the mechanics of neck anatomy and a little bit about physiology. So right now I'm going to follow up a little bit about interventional. So if you do have neck pain, either acute or chronic, first and foremost we need to diagnose that. So it's important, if you have an injury in particular, that you go to a professional so somebody can evaluate the level and degree of dysfunction that you have. So when I work with people in the office, we do a complete orthopedic and neurological evaluation, including a case history, and we sit down and we talk about things. It's important before somebody does something to you that there's an examination. So I really stress that to my clients, and that sometimes interventions are quite cavalier, and they shouldn't be. There's a lot of underlying issues that could be in the background creating a signal called pain, and it's important to address those. Once that's done successfully, and an identification of why the problem is there to begin with and the extent of the problem that it is, the intervention becomes unique to that person, as it always should be. So when we look at somebody interventionally, there's always an exercise and there's always a mobilization component, and there's also always some sort of an addressing of physiology as far as pain and inflammation. So what I mean about that, or for that, or to describe that, is first and foremost we look at the structure, and then we start to determine what it is that we need to do to rehabilitate the structure. Mobilization is the key to life. When joints in the spine or joints in the body in general stop moving, trouble is not far away. So when we stop moving an area, not only the neurological stimulation from the joint to the brain itself is now modified, but it also, the mobilization and the range of motion of the joint becomes impaired. So motion is the key to life. When we stop moving, we stop stimulating our brain. Our brain has what's called the somatosensory area, which is a sensory area perceiving motion. And what drives the brain is muscle spindles, which are parts of the muscles themselves, and joint mechanoreceptors. Joint mechanoreceptors are little filaments or little signal mechanisms in the joint itself that tell the brain what's going on. And there are lots of different types of mechanoreceptors and sensors, I should say, joint mechanoreceptors being one of those. So when you have an injury, resting the area is important, but not allowing the area to stop moving unless it's an actual fracture and needs to be immobilized, or an injury of that nature. So movement is the key to life. So moving within tolerance is one of the keys. So movement, and this is always unique to the person, the evaluation and the circumstances, is the first thing that we do. Now, passive range of motion, which means somebody moving you, is part of that process. Ultimately, from passive range of motion to active range of motion with resistance is the best resolve for any type of a problem, whether it be neck, low back, shoulder, any type of a problem. But it needs to be graded, and it needs to be coached through a progressive process. Part of that process is feedback from the client or the patient to say, yes, I feel better, no, I don't. Exercise in motion is kind of like standing on the edge of a cliff hoping not to fall off. If in fact you do too much, like the Three Bears in the Porridge, and you go too far, not a good day, not a good resolve. And the problem is, most of the time, you don't know until after the process. So it's okay if it hurts for about an hour after a procedure. That's pretty normal, especially if you're pushing a little bit. But if it hurts for a day or two or a week, you did too much. So when we think about rehabilitation, in particular in this conversation about neck pain, motion, practical application, even manipulation, which is part of oftentimes what we'll do in the office, is really, really helpful. So manipulation actually resets what's called the gain to the muscles surrounding a joint. So basically a joint has muscular stability coming from surrounding structures. When a muscle's in spasm, let's say creating some sort of an antalgia or a lean, what happens is those muscles shorten, and the gain of the muscle, which should be at a zero level, starts to heighten. So when we manipulate a joint, when we actually do a chiropractic adjustment or a manipulation of different sorts, what happens, the surrounding muscles themselves that are very tight reset the gain, and this is a neurological process. That's the dynamics of why manipulation is such an interesting tool. So your brain has a perception that this now is normal, if that's how you're holding yourself, And if we were able to successfully and safely manipulate a joint, depending on the exam and the circumstances, if we're able to do that successfully, that muscle tone surrounding the joint that's inflamed and irritated can be reset through a neurological reflex to allow the neck itself to achieve a more normal status. And that's why oftentimes manipulation is done repetitively. So when we talk about neck pain, we also talk about pain and inflammation. So there's always a lifestyle piece to everything, especially when you talk to me in my office. And the lifestyle is just as important as anything else. So muscles require hydration, rest, exercise, and deep, restful sleep in particular to regain themselves. So we have to have enough protein, we have to have enough hydration, enough stimulation, and during deep, restful sleep, we release something called human growth hormone. And HGH is what basically allows muscles to heal and also to get larger. So if you're not sleeping well, and pain can also be a deterrent to that, if you're not hydrating well, if you're not getting enough protein, the appropriate proteins, and you're not getting the appropriate energy sources from carbohydrates, vegetables in particular, there's at least a discussion to be had for that. Just know as you watch more and more of what we talk about, what I talk about in my office, you'll learn more and more about the importance of how food and lifestyle is so critical for repair. So I hope that's helpful. This is Dr. Richard Herbold. Capital District Vitality Center is our website and domain. And it's always a pleasure to come to you, and thanks for joining me and spending time today.